when we're talking packaging here, obviously it's a big focus of what our conversation is today, and it's a big part of what exists at the end of a product. But packaging is really just a vehicle. It's a vehicle to get that product from the manufacturer to the consumer safely, protect it, making sure it's still delivered the way that you intend it to be delivered. But then the packaging comes into how you can effectively use a product. So have you got the right dispensing mechanism to make sure that the consumer experience is great, so that you're pumping out 5 mils of product like you might for a hand wash is going to be way too much for what you need for a skincare product or a makeup product. So really functionality is really important. But then you can also understand from a branding point of view, products actually communicate a lot. Packaging communicates a lot as well. It communicates the principles of a brand. It's got the all of the safe usage instructions. It's got a lot of marketing messages on it. And so you can sort of understand over time how we got to a point where packaging just became over-designed, over-flourished, because it was all about what can you add. I mean, yes, it's this huge cosmetics trade show. Suppliers, brands, manufacturers from all over the world. And I think probably what we really noticed this last year compared to when I'd been, I mean, I was there last year as well, and previous to that, it was probably 10 years ago. So dramatically different to 10 years ago, but even different to last year is actually in terms of sustainability, in terms of sustainable offerings from packaging vendors and even cosmetic manufacturing partners as well. Sustainability is front of mind for everyone. It was there a little bit a year ago. It wasn't there at all 10 years ago. So I think when thinking about, even from a packaging point of view, the availability of post-consumer recycled inputs into packaging materials just didn't exist. It was very, very hard to find someone who offered that. That's now standard. If you can't measure it, you can't control it. How do you know that you're doing well? And this is why, you know, for so long, financial measurements have been critical. They're a critical part of understanding how's a business doing at the end of the year. You know, public listed companies need to report all their financials. It's a measure, and you can see, okay, this has been better or worse than last year. This spend has been better or worse. This line has been better or worse. So when you look at even like a triple bottom line business, then you can start to see actually how do you measure these different parts of the business that's not financial, and how do we get better at looking at different KPIs for how we can look at actually, are we making progress here? And when it comes to something like packaging, then we really are looking at how do you compare a glass bottle with a plastic bottle with an aluminium bottle? Ultimately, what's better? I mean, we can say, okay, yes, we want to prioritize something that's recyclable. In theory, you can look at all 3 of those materials and they are recyclable. But actually, how do you know which one's the best option? The big question. It's super complex. But I think that understanding, going back to the design principles, so much of your sustainability impacts down the track are made with the decisions you make up front. It's really hard to change. It's really hard to change packaging down the track. It's really hard to, you have to, you know, change a lot of your supply chain. You've got to repeat a lot of your testing. You change your consumer experience. So much changes. So the decisions you actually make up front of, are you going to use plastic? Are you going to use glass? Are you going to use aluminium? What weight of material are you going to use for each of those is actually really, really important. So we worked with Phantm for a couple of projects where we were trying to look at different packaging updates that we were looking at. So one of them was an existing packaging option in a glass bottle, and we wanted to consider, is this actually the best packaging that we could use for this product? So we were able to compare that to a plastic type, to a refill and recharge option, and looked at different sources of those materials around the world. And for us to be able to compare this, it's really a gut feel. We're like, well, we think that one feels like it's going to be better. That one feels like it's going to be perceived by the consumer to be better as well. But it's very hard to compare this because there's so many different inputs. There's the, you know, the environmental input, there's the water input, there's the shipping inputs. And being able to compare this on one scale is actually really hard. We couldn't do that. So we actually worked with Phantm to be able to say, what's the difference? What is the data? What does the data say comparing each of these options? And if we go down a recharge option, because actually upfront that packaging is much more impactful than some of the other single-use options, we were able to look at, well, how many recharges do we actually need before this actually becomes a better solution? And is it actually realistic? So I think that was a great example for us in trying to decide, actually, we know that every time we update a packaging, we want to be moving forward. We don't want to be moving backwards. We want to be moving towards our APCO targets, the national packaging targets, but there are a few different ways that we can do that. And so actually trying to go, what's actually the best way we can do that? We worked with Phantm on that to help guide that decision. So I feel like it's a bit of a system. It is a systems change that has to happen, but the more people, the more of us, the more brands that start to do it and start to cause the demand helps shift the dial.